Podcasting 101 with me, your host, Rachel. This podcast is for female business owners and solopreneurs that are looking to start a podcast that adds to your own already awesome offering. I'll give you helpful advice that you can take away and use in your podcasting journey. I hope to answer those tricky questions that just keep you from starting. Once a month, I'll be joined by other female podcasters. They'll share their journey with you and offer tips and advice they discovered along the way. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode. Today, I have the wonderful Michelle DeNio on with me. Hi, Michelle.
Hello. How are you guys?
Thank you so much for coming on my show. I've been a great admirer of your podcast, which is Strategy in Small Doses, for a while now. So I'm really pleased that you can come on and share your experience of what it was like setting up your podcast. So do you want to tell us a little bit about why you decided to, what your podcast is about and why you decided to make your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, podcasting was something that I wanted to do, but I'll tell you, it sat on the back burner for quite a while. I had my original idea for the podcast was completely different. And I got overwhelmed with the tech, with all of the logistics of it and everything else. And I just kept pushing it back. And then finally realized I was really doing a lot of Facebook Lives. I did a lot of Facebook Lives inside of a private Facebook community that I have. And I don't know what or when or how or what, but finally I just realized this is your podcast. Actually, I think what made me really hone in on that was I started listening to another podcast called Daily Mind Medicine. And his podcast is unedited. It's very short. It's every day. And I just fell in love with it. And I thought, you know what? This is exactly what you do. He just jumps on, shares his thoughts, when he's got something on his mind. And so that was really kind of how Strategy in Small Doses was born. It was basically I have these random thoughts or based on a conversation that I've had or a client conversation. And I would just jump on Facebook Live and share them. And I thought, there's your podcast right there. Stop making it so difficult. And I was overcomplicating it in my head. And as soon as I stopped doing that, that's when I started the podcast. So the goal was always just to keep them super short, bite-sized, because the length of podcasts, the episode length, was really what was stopping me, and guests and bringing guests on. But we'll dive into that a little bit deeper.
I remember when I first met you, when I heard you on Rosemary's Too Busy to Podcast, and we had a conversation about the short, snappy episodes. And it was really interesting when you talked about listener habits and how they've changed since COVID. And that's something that I hadn't considered. And that is the main reason why my solo episodes are short as well, because I really liked the way that you got across your message and you said what you wanted to say. And they don't have to be 30, 40 minutes, an hour. You can do them so that they're valuable in that short space of time. Yeah,
actually, and quite honestly, it's one of the biggest pieces of feedback I get on my podcast is that everybody loves that they're short. They love that they're just short and easy to digest because again, really people aren't commuting. We're not sitting around. We're not in the car for 20, 30 minutes. That was always when I was listening. I used to nanny and I had a 30-minute drive. And that was always when I listened to podcasts. And then I stopped doing that. And I'm I don't really listen. I just don't think to listen to them at home unless I'm getting ready or something like that. But even then, I'm not getting ready for an hour,
Yeah, it's made me consider that as well, because that's changed mine. I had about a half an hour commute in the end, and I listened to a lot then. So now I try to go on a walk but because I'm in podcasts, I consciously, and I want to listen. I consciously make a decision, but I think generally speaking, people do enjoy the fact that they are short. Everyone has time limits on their days as well to fit so much in. There's so much content to consume. So that does make it easier for your listeners to be engaged. Absolutely. So when you had decided to dive in and share your thoughts and do the short episodes, how much planning did you do? Did you plan to do a season? Did you plan out a few months worth?
Yeah, my goal was to have one of the things that I also knew with podcasting what kept me kind of procrastinating on it for a long time was that I did not want to ever lose my consistency with it. And I knew that I had to get ahead of the game, because if I started to feel pressure that I would give up, or it would fall through the cracks or anything like that. So my goal when I launched it was I launched 2 episodes per week, again, because they're super short. So to me, it made sense to do 2 episodes. I could do probably less than that even now, but I really do like doing 2. So for me, my goal is always to have 8 ahead. I don't always get that far ahead. I go through spurts where I do really good, and then I get kind of caught up because life happens, which is exactly why I like to have those ahead, because life does happen, right? And so in those moments when we have that maybe slower season and I can just bang a bunch of them out, I do, so that when life gets crazy, I don't have to feel stressed about that, because that to me was the one thing I knew. If I knew I had a podcast that was supposed to release on Monday and I hadn't had anything recorded, that would send me over the edge, because I do not work well under pressure. That is not when I best record. It's not when my message comes across the best. I like to record when I'm in the moment, when I'm feeling inspired, so that's where I literally will just sometimes turn on my camera, or I put it into a ClickUp doc or like a ClickUp space that I have that just kind of like captures the idea in the moment, so that when I get into my recording, I've got it there and I can just easily pick up my thought again.
So you don't, I mean, like, I know that you don't script them, but you just have like an idea or a thought, and then you talk around that little part of inspiration.
Yeah. Usually what I do is if I have like a thought that comes up, like for example, one that's coming up right now that I've yet to record is talking about influencers, because it keeps coming up in the space about, this competitive nature, and there's influencers out there that are, making more money than us and they give less service, blah, blah, blah. So like, I'll just throw it in my ClickUp doc that says like, we all have an influencer we hate. Right. And I know what my thought is around that. And so it's there just to remind me. So I capture the thought like in the moment, as soon as I see something, and then I can go back and I think about it. I look at it and think about what I want to talk about. But sometimes, honestly, some of my best episodes are when I literally just hit the record button.
That is great. I think, and the ability with the short episodes, it gives you that ability to do that. I don't think that you could, if you had a 30-minute episode, it'd be very difficult to do like an on the hoof kind of thing for half an hour. I think it would end up being a lot of waffle, but you get to the point. So many of your episodes I mean, I can't sing your praises enough for the podcast, because I absolutely love it. And I often go back and listen to them with my notepad sometimes if I've been cooking, and I listen to them, and I like the fact that there is actionable things in there to do and to take on board for your business. It really makes you think. When you're coming up with your areas of inspiration, who do you have in mind? Who is your target audience?
90% of the time, my podcast topics come from a conversation I've either had with a client or a prospect or a coffee chat, something like that, somebody in my network. So when I am recording my podcast, it's as if I'm just having a strategy session with a client. That's who it's like in my mind, I just get on Zoom or any camera, and again, I literally just view it as if I'm speaking directly to my client, and I talk the same way. It's not edited in any way. It's not scripted. And I've actually gotten some feedback there. People feel like they're listening and they're like, Michelle, I feel like you're sitting right next to me. And that's my goal. Like, I want people to feel like as if we just jumped on a phone call. You're getting the same exact information out of me as you would in a coffee chat as you are on my podcast. Like, nothing truly is different.
I think that works really well. I'd agree with thinking that you're there right in the room with you having a conversation. In regards to kind of the tech side of things, how you say, you don't edit? Do you edit I know you have an evergreen intro and outro that you put on. Mm-hmm. Do you put those together yourself, or do you have someone that helps you?
I don't. And that was the other thing with tech. And I knew that the tech side of it would send me over the edge, and the show notes and all the preparation and the graphics and the social and all of that. And so when I decided to start the podcast, I immediately hired a podcast manager. I actually went through 2, but I knew that I would not be able to do that on my own. The tech side of it held me up for a long time. So I did have my intro and outro pre-recorded with a voiceover artist friend of mine. I scripted it. She recorded it. I probably could have done it. But again, like getting the background music in and getting the voice right and that's not my area of expertise at all. And I didn't want to spend time doing it. And to me, all of those things are just reasons why it would not have happened, or things that would have held me up. And I refused to allow that. And so I knew that in order to do this, I had to hire it out. And so I did hire out the intro and outro. We use Anchor. I may eventually switch, but again, it was a matter of getting it done, not perfect, and all of these other things. And I knew that I wanted to spend my money on somebody helping me versus a platform. And I've had great luck with Anchor. I've not had any trouble with it. Their software adds the intro and outro. They have a software where you can upload the file and then you can add your intro file and your outro file, and it just does it for you as far as I know. I literally do nothing except for record them. And it's been working fine. I don't edit them out. My dog barked the other day in one of them. I didn't edit it out. One day I was recording and the trash guy showed up and the windows were open. And it was banging all around. But again, it's life. To me, it's not about being perfect. And I want that's a very important message to me, that done is better than perfect. And so I don't want to edit all that stuff out, because you know what? The message is still the message. Yes, there might be a little bit of background noise here and there, but regardless, it's done. It's done. And the message that I have to share is far more important than whether or not the trash truck is driving by.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that side of things, that the tech, the editing, is a big barrier. When I've asked some questions on my Instagram stories about, what's the biggest thing that holds you up, tech is the number one thing that holds everybody up. I know some people aren't in the position of, outsourcing or being able to pay for a platform. I use Anchor for my first podcast and I absolutely thought it was great. It did everything I wanted it to do. I think pretty much most of my clients use Anchor as well. I've gone for Captivate this time because I knew I wanted to invest in a paid platform. But for me as a podcast manager, that was a decision that I made as a podcast manager as well. But there are plenty of platforms out there for you. If the money side of things is a barrier, to be able to use, that work absolutely brilliantly. It links up to Spotify. You can actually put music through videos through Anchor now, and Spotify will host. Yeah, I'm helping one of my clients move and put their videos on there as well. It only goes out on Spotify, but it still sends the audio to everywhere else, which is a really great. So it's been interesting to see where that goes and how popular that would be for Spotify. So yeah, Anchor's a great tool. So you mentioned you have a podcast manager who helps you with your promotion. What kind of promotion do you do for your podcast? Do you do audiograms and have some quotes and things?
Yeah, the marketing of the podcast has definitely probably been a little bit harder than I would have expected it. Just not in a bad way, but it's something I feel, well, there's a couple things. One is podcasting, you don't get, aside from downloads, you don't get a lot of analytics on it. It's very hard to understand. Like, it's not like on social media where you get likes or you get comments or you get this or that, right? Like any other social platform, you get all of these things. And where a podcast, people could listen. I remember I had somebody reach out to me and she was like, I'm your biggest fan. I've listened to every one of your episodes. I don't even know who she is. So like those things to me are like so amazing. Like when it's like, how the hell did you even find that? I don't even know who you are. So those things to me are just mind boggling. So, but from the promotion side of it, usually what we do is, again, I don't do any of this, and that may be good or bad. I don't know. I literally just upload the raw files and know that it's handled. But what we do a mixture of audiograms. We've started to do small video clips because I do record all of my episodes on video. So what I've been trying to do, and what does seem to really gain a lot more traction than anything else, is these little 1-minute snippets of the actual video where people can see me, they're captioned, etc. So between the audiograms, the video, and then usually it's a long form social post that captures kind of the essence of it. We've tried a couple different things. We've tried where the long form social posts, we've also tried, here are the 3 key takeaways, go listen. That I have not found to work as well. People don't really go listen. It's like not enough information to capture the attention. It's a little bit too cryptic. And I'd rather just get the message out there. Again, to me, it's most important to get the message out there. And so if people go and listen to the podcast, great. If they don't, so be it. You know what I mean? The message is still received. That's what's most important to me.
Yeah. I've seen your videos on LinkedIn. I like those. They're nice video clips. I think that people do engage with those quite well, and the audiograms work quite well as well for social media.
With the audiograms, though, you definitely have to caption them, because a lot of people, they see it, but they're not listening to it. So if you don't have captions on it, they don't gain you anything more.
I use Headliner is quite good at, they'll caption it when you pull it in. Yeah. So you've got and then you can actually tweak the size of it and the color and stuff, which is really cool. So I quite that's like my favorite audiogram maker. Do you feel like your podcast has helped your business? Like, it's aligned with what you do? Do you feel like
it is? It's very aligned. I definitely think I could be utilizing it more than I am. I will say that it's one of the things I really, really would like to get into a bigger promotion with it. I don't do a lot of guest podcasting. I don't bring a lot of guests on my show. I know that would help. But again, the logistics of bringing guests on to me is so overwhelming. And quite honestly, you have to find the right guest, right? Because otherwise, they don't share it. And so it doesn't really gain you anything. It's just a lot of extra work, in my opinion. So I do think eventually I will start doing that. But really the solo episodes, if nothing else for me, it's how I best speak. So my goal it's how I best share content. And so my ultimate goal with the podcast was that I could put it out there and then create content from that. So from that respect, it's done very, very well. It's really helped me stay consistent with my content. It's really helped me get my message across. As far as has it brought in clients? Not yet. I don't know that. But again, I also know that when you have a podcast, if somebody is kind of lurking or stalking you in the background, they start to listen. Like I had somebody right now who reached out to me and she goes, I just want to kind of hear your content a little bit more before we jump on a call. So she's been listening to my podcast. It's a great way for me to say, hey, if you want some free content, go check it out. I use it more for that perspective, more as like an authority builder than a lead generation tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that works really well. Like I started this podcast because I wanted to talk to my ideal client and I guess kind of use it as a bit of a lead generator as well. But I also wanted to give some content to those people as well that were on the fence about podcasting, or perhaps, people who just wanted to do it themselves and they just wanted somewhere to go that maybe in the future might want to have someone help them with their podcast. But I agree the same way with keeping your marketing consistent. I feel like podcasts are a really great way to do that because you're creating that consistent piece of content that you can then repurpose into the rest of your marketing. So when you're thinking about starting a podcast and you think that it's going to be a lot of extra work, you can actually make it work a bit more for you than, obviously it is a bit of work because you still have to put the time and effort into it, but it will help with your marketing, because I felt like that with mine as well, that it helps you have a focus for the week, or something that you can dive in a little bit deeper. Whatever you've touched on in each of your episodes, you can dive in a bit deeper to help your audience.
Yeah, I've used it a couple times as done little mini series where I'll do 8 steps or 8 things, and that led to a lead generation or a lead magnet. I've done a mini series that kind of dove a little deeper into my route framework, and then that led to a masterclass. Did anything come of it from the podcast? Again, it's very hard to track. So I have to just assume that it helps, right? But I don't know that because you really can't track that unless, I know you, I started listening on my intros, when I start my episodes, I'm like, please, if you're listening, like reach out to me and say hello, like, let me know you're here, because it's so hard for me to like understand, like, who's here, who's listening, like, please let me know. And I do love that. I've had a couple of people like actually send me a message and say, hey, I was just listening to your podcast and you said to say hello, so I wanted to let you know. And I really appreciate that. Like, that means so much to me, because again, it's very hard to track unless you're 100% and you've grown a massive audience, like some of these big names like Amy Porterfield and different things, like they, I'm sure, can track like certain links coming through show notes and different things. I don't have any of that set up right now.
No, I don't either. And I think that's part of the growth aspect of like when your podcast grows. I was talking about this with another lady earlier today, and it is very talking about like listener engagement and like getting people to engage with your podcast. And it is a long-term game. I even think over 12 months, if you haven't already got a well-grown audience when you're starting your podcast, I think it's important not to get caught up in those kind of numbers and things as well, and downloads, to try and focus on making your content as accessible for your audience as possible. And then the rest will kind of come, and hopefully like your social media or your marketing, you'll grow that little by little, but it's not a a quick fix if you want to kind of start a podcast because you think you're going to get to the top 10 and whatever. That's not the right reason to start your podcast. It's
absolutely,
to add value to your audience. What would be kind of your top piece of advice for people who want to start a podcast? Would it be just get ahead and do it?
Just do it. Just do it.
Just getting ahead and do it
for sure. Don't let yourself get in your head. I had all the thoughts around it, like who's going to listen to this? What happens if it takes off? What happens if it doesn't take off? What if I get negative feedback? Because a lot of the gurus say like, a lot of what I say kind of goes against the grain in a lot of ways. So I thought, okay, this is very public. And again, it's one thing to go live in a Facebook group where the people, right? It's a very close-knit audience. You know exactly who you're speaking to. Where a podcast, it can be shared. It can go out to a bunch of people you don't know. And it can be very scary. Those thoughts can come in and like, oh my God, what if people don't like it? What if I start getting negative feedback? What if somebody contradicts what I have to say? But the reality is that there's more people out there that need to hear your message that are there. Haters are always going to hate, it's like that saying, haters going to hate, but you have to just figure out what it is that you like, what you feel the most comfortable with, what you feel you can maintain the consistency with, and figure out why you're doing it. Again, I didn't start my podcast with the intention of it making me thousands of dollars, right? The intention was, it's how I best serve. It's how I can get my best message out there. And so that's why I started it, and I will grow it and I will stick with it. And I love it, but I don't have any expectations from it. I'm doing it more because it's how I best share, and hoping that it resonates with, and it is resonating, and that's enough for me. So you have to figure out what it is that's going to work for you, whether it's guest episodes. You don't have to do, if you don't like, I don't like bringing guests on my podcast. It's not because I don't like speaking to other people. It's a lot of work for me. And it definitely sends me backwards. And I realize that because I've tried it a couple of times, and I'm like, I get wrapped up, and how are you going to get them the information? So don't get wrapped up in all of the shoulds, which is my message in general. Overall is, don't get wrapped up in the shoulds. Do what you feel comfortable with, do what lights you up. And if that's a 2-minute episode, great. If it's an hour-long episode, great. If it's guests, great. Solo, great. Edited, you know what I mean? Like it will be successful when you feel confident about it. That's what's most important. If you feel good about it and you feel confident about it and you know that the message is worth sharing, that's what's most important. And so just do it, but find a system that works for you.
Yeah, that is great advice. Absolutely. Finding something that works for you and your business, and not comparing it to everybody else's podcast or whatever it is you're trying to do. You just, do it your own way.
Yeah. And people really don't expect perfection. I really challenge you to go and listen to all of these podcasts that you listen to. If you listen to podcasts and you're thinking about starting a podcast, whether it's Amy Porterfield, Tiffany Carter, James Wedmore, any of these big names, they're not perfect. They're not, they have a little bit more editing and maybe some bigger music intros and all of that. But I mean, there's dogs barking, there's birds chirping, you know what I mean? They're not editing all that stuff out. And think about your own listening habits too. All of these fears that you have about other people judging you, think about yourself and your own listening habits. Do you listen to a podcast and think to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe she just took a sip of water? Well, if your mouth is dry, you need water, right? You don't think that, you don't think negatively of others. So stop putting all this negative thoughts around yourself too.
Yeah, that mean we are worst on ourselves. We would never say those things to anybody else.
And we don't think anything of it.
No.
You don't. You just keep listening, right? You just keep listening. Even that one that I listened to that I told you was kind of my inspiration. A lot of times he's walking, so he's out of breath. The wind is blowing. I don't think anything of it because his message is so powerful that the rest doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's all you're thinking about, what he's talking about, not what's going on around him.
Yeah, so that's my advice. Just start.
That's great advice. And thank you so much for coming on and giving us your insights into what it's like starting and running a podcast.
Thanks you. I appreciate you having me here.
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, share and subscribe. Your support means so much to me. If there's a question or topic you'd like covering, then I'd love to hear from you. Find the podcast on Instagram @RachelBotfield and drop me a DM. Till next time, bye.